Caring about the climate, caring about the community, changing the conversation. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got your black.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, where the sky is the limit. What an amazing day in American politics, American culture, and American life. This morning, I had the great privilege of going over to my father's organization. He calls me and he says, "Hey, Jesse, I want you to come over to PUSH." And we have dozens of ministers from around the country who are now mobilizing and organizing, and they are taking advantage of the technology to have a weekly meeting. And present on the call, leading the meeting, was Van Jones, Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend Charles Jenkins, and literally hundreds of other ministers talking about the nature of the struggle and some aspects of this struggle that we cannot even see. I really want to get a hold of that video and bring it to you live the first chance I get. Also, I want to say and give a shout out to my younger brother, Yusuf Jackson, who always has been a fairly conservative person, a conservative businessman. But I think the modern era is bringing the civil rights leader out of him, and I am so proud of him. I want him to know that. I know that he's listening, and the number of people who are there tune into our show. I'm really, really excited about that. I also want to thank Reverend Frank Thomas, who's teaching a bi-weekly class at Rainbow Push Coalition called Preaching in Hitler's Shadow, a book by Dean G. Stroud, Sermons of Resistance in the Third Reich. Dr. Frank Thomas, one of the most gifted African-American preachers in the United States, scholars, thinkers, is preaching from the subject and teaching from the subject of a book written by Dean G. Stroud called Preaching in Hitler's Shadow. I'm going to try and find Dean Stroud and have him on our program. I have asked a very capable young man who has been a guest on our program before to be our very special guest in this hour. Diallo Brooks, with over 25 years of leadership experience, has dedicated his career to working for social justice through government, philanthropic, and nonprofit advocacy institutions. Former senior equity fellow for the Department of Education, that is the United States Department of Education, where he was on loan from the Schott Foundation for Public Education. In this role, his focus was addressing equity and justice issues within the Justice Department. His expertise in organizing campaigns, nonpartisan civic engagement programs, strategic planning projects, and leadership development initiatives contributed to the Schott Foundation's mission of creativity and creating a healthy living and learning environment for all children. I couldn't think of a better person to be on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show for this hour in light of the news of the last week, that the President of the United States has issued an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education, where Diallo Brooks interned, served, and worked on behalf of the Schott Foundation. And the new numbers coming back from the 4,100 people who work at the U.S. Department of Education is that more than 1,500 people have already been fired in the first round. Diallo Brooks, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you, Jesse, for having me on the show.
Diallo, the ramifications of this have to be nothing short of extraordinary for someone who's dedicated their life to educating the American people and trying to address these kinds of equitable issues and disparities. Share with us what's going on in your mind. What does this mean? And share with our listeners just how devastating these acts represent.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. Having spent the last year up and through January at the Department of Education, working in the Office of the Secretary, pushing forward equity initiatives both internally and externally, it's going to be really devastating to see the cuts that are happening at the department. The cuts in staff, but also the cuts in resources. So I'm going to outline kind of 5 things that are really going to be impacted by these cuts. One is funding cuts. The department is planning to lay off or is laying off about 1,300 employees, which could lead to significant funding cuts for schools. This can affect programs like tutoring, after-school activities, special education, making it harder for students to catch up academically post the pandemic. The deep impact it's going to have on low-income communities, Title I schools, special education and disability, uncertainty and fear in communities, and higher education, to name a few.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. When we come forward on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, Diallo Brooks is going to break down for us the devastating nature of what is impacting all Americans and the nation's education system.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
A new day is on the horizon.
Behind every great moment in history, there's a woman whose story went untold. This March on KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing those hidden narratives to light. Hear extraordinary stories of women who transformed science, politics, arts, and community. Women you've never heard of, but should know. Celebrating Women's History Month on KBLA Talk 1580, where every story matters.
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm. If you own a timeshare, don't miss this public service announcement from Chuck McDowell, founder of Wesley Financial Group.
If you receive an unsolicited phone call or mail piece to discuss selling, renting, or especially canceling your timeshare, don't fall for it. If you really want out of your timeshare, hang the phone up immediately or throw that mail piece in the trash and contact your timeshare resort or Wesley Financial Group for assistance with your timeshare. As the only Inc. 500 timeshare cancellation company, our knowledge, experience, and results has made Wesley a trusted resource for over 40,000 families we've helped get out of their timeshare. Give us a call and I'll send you our timeshare exit information kit free with the straight facts about your timeshare and all of your options for cancellation.
Call for your free info kit, 800-511-2112. That's 800-511-2112. 800-511-2112.
We've got a lot to talk about.
On January 7th, 2025, the Eaton Canyon Fire scorched Altadena, torching everything in its path. Homes, wealth, and legacy burned in one night. But will Altadena rise from the ashes? I'm James Farr. On the Conversation Live Altadena Rising, we're chronicling the recovery, the resilience, and justice for the nation. This is the show of record, unapologetically progressive. We're not blacking down. So join me, James Farr, on the Conversation Live Altadena Rising every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific with a rebroadcast on Sunday at noon.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is Diallo Brooks. Diallo, just before the break, you were beginning to go through your list, your outline on your thoughts on the cuts and the idea of the elimination of the Department of Education. I'd like you to start from the top again.
Definitely. It's my pleasure to go through that list. Unfortunately, from the cuts, we're going to see probably roughly around 1,300 employees that'll be let go from the Department of Education. And this can affect programs like tutoring, after school activities, special education, making it harder for students to catch up academically post the pandemic. Also, it's going to have a deep impact on low income communities, particularly the Title I schools, which receive supplemental financial assistance to support children from low income families. That can be partially affected as well. Special education and disability changes to the department could impact special education programs that serve disabled communities and all other communities as well. And then it's going to cause it has actually caused a lot of fear and uncertainty in a lot of communities around the country with amongst educators, teachers that are in the classroom. They don't know what this environment is going to look like. Parents and the students don't know what this new environment is going to look like. And then also higher education, the access to higher education will be impacted by dismantling and the cuts that we see coming in the Department of Education. And I mentioned in the last show that we had too, it's also the civil rights enforcement is going to be negatively impacted as well.
When you talk about civil rights enforcement, we're not just talking about racial discrimination. You're talking about the civil rights of the disabled, the civil rights of every student in every conceivable category who the Department of Education, or which the Department of Education seeks to address with funding, with block grants, with monitoring, to follow court orders when in fact the disabled are being discriminated against. It's the Department of Education that initiates most of those actions. Am I right?
Exactly. They initiate those actions and they make sure and hold accountable states and local education agencies to follow through on what is the law. So if the law is broken, they will bring a case and resolve that case. Usually they work with those jurisdictions as well sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's, unintentional. And so they try to mitigate those circumstances. But if you eliminate that department, there's not the folks there to investigate and then intervene on behalf of children that are being discriminated against.
On this question of building a more perfect union, obviously there are 50 different state education systems. Within each state, there are municipal education systems, in other words, cities. And within those states, there are also county education systems. The only chance that the American people have on the question of education for building a more perfect union is to have a United States Department of Education that oversees the coordination of equality amongst, between, and within the states. Your thoughts about that deal?
I mean, I think that's a very important point. Is that, if you look across the world where education is done well, the countries that tend to perform well, they typically have a nationalized education system, an education system where the standards are set on the national level. There's a kind of core curriculum that's set on the national level and goals that are set on the national level to compete. And actually, in just preparation for this, I kind of pulled out places around the country that are doing this. And there's, several places around the country around the world that are doing this and really focusing in on the well-being of the child as it relates to the well-being of the community as a whole. And so it's important that we understand that if you want our education system to work, we should look at models around the world where education is done the right way. And not look at ways in which we disperse and have 50 different systems across the country around how we educate our students, particularly in a transient environment where we move from state to state.
Now, I want to come back to that point because I think you made a very, very critical point. The most outrageous thing, which all of our listeners can probably appreciate, is that we live in the most technologically advantaged and blessed nation in the history of the world. That we are the most sophisticated, that we are the most culturally advanced. But the fact that a list even exists that says this is the top state in the union in terms of providing education, and this is the 50th state in the union in terms of providing education. The fact that the list even exists suggests disunion. Some states use coal from mountains to fund their education. Some states use gambling, like Las Vegas and Nevada, to fund education. Some states use Silicon Valley, like California and other more profitable, if you will, states where industries have located. But then some states, their education system is based on corn. It's based on soybean. It's based on tobacco. It's based on cotton. The disparities in funding education are so extraordinary in the United States that we can't come to the idea of building a more perfect union across the country from sea to shining sea. Now, this transient issue that Diallo talks about, which I want to press him on now, is this. When you buy a home in America, you also buy a school. When I bought my home on the south side of Chicago, I didn't just buy my house. I bought the school district. And some people buy their homes first by looking at what the school district is, and then they determine where they want to buy their home because they want their children to go to the best public school available. In other words, if someone works in one part of the country and their job shifts to another part of the country, they shouldn't have to be looking for a decent home because of the disparity in educating their children. It should follow them along with their job. Your thoughts, Diallo?
Well, that's exactly right. And then those disparities are even more exacerbated by socioeconomic status as well. So, those of us that have a privilege of being able to move where we want to move, and locate ourselves in a school district, for example, that is quote unquote thriving, all Americans don't have that option, right? And so if there's disparities in school systems, those that have more resources are obviously going to have better resources in their schools. And that's just not how we should operate as a country. We should have a level playing field and actually have a playing field where those that need more assistance get that assistance to make sure that we level the playing field. And so there's a lot of conversation about school choice and all of these great things, but all of us know that the best way to impact our young people is having schools within their neighborhood that are functioning schools, that have healthy environments, have the resources they need to support the children in our community. They shouldn't have to be bused across a city, across a state. In a lot of places, particularly rural areas, you don't even have that option. There's not the next school district over, it could be hundreds of miles away because your location is so small. And so this not only impacts low-income Black and brown students, it also impacts rural white students as well, or urban white students that live in a particular zip code. And so we should have a country where no matter what zip code you live in, you're provided with the right types of resources to educate our people. This is what's best for our country, for our young people, and just for the health and competitiveness of our country.
I think I couldn't have said it better than you just said. If we operate from certain assumptions that a smaller class size, number of students per teacher, is the right learning environment, let's say it's 15 students or less per teacher. Some schools have 30 students, 40 students per teacher. That's not a learning environment while someone in the back is playing on their computer or playing on the internet or playing with their phone, disrupting the rest of the class. A teacher who has 10 or 15 students can have the how shall I say it, the unadulterated attention of the students while they are getting their instruction. But it's not just teacher instruction. Some students in the 8th grade have teachers who have master's degrees. There are 95,000 8th grade classes across the United States. Many of those 8th grade teachers don't have master's degrees. Some 8th grade teachers have PhDs.
Mm-hmm.
Some students are learning from 8th grade teachers who only have a GED. So there's no standard for 8th grade instruction, let alone K through 7 or 9 through 12. The purpose and the role of the Department of Education, if one teacher has a master's degree, a qualified teacher, a PhD, why shouldn't everyone's child have access to that level of instruction? That's just instruction. I'm not discussing basketball coaches for men and women or young children who are male and female. I'm not discussing volleyball coaches. I'm not discussing swimming, Olympic-sized swimming pools, while some people are learning how to prepare themselves for the Olympics in low-income, poor white and poor black communities. No Olympic swimming pools, and therefore those children, when they're 18 or 19 years old of Olympic age, will not be competing in the Olympics. And it's our tax dollars because our system has not built a more perfect union on the question of education. Diallo?
Yeah, I mean that's well stated as far as like the conundrum that we're in, right? It's this disparity between different systems of education in this country, and it's about resources, it's about equity, and like I mentioned before, if you look at places around the globe that do it well, like Norway, for example, they have a nationalized system. It's a centralized education system. They prioritize inclusivity and equal opportunity for all students. That's a priority for them. And they focus on the students' well-being. They have kind of minimal standards, standardized testing, but they have a collaborative learning environment. And so it produces for the nation a robust experience for their young people. There's lessons that we can learn from places around the world around this work. And there's folks that studied this. The problem is, Jesse, there's a billionaire class that never had their kids in any public institution through the entirety of their lives. They have an exclusive educational system that mirrors what we want for everybody. They have it exclusively, so they are able to play around and mess around in the mud of our education system without really understanding what the real impact is for young people across the country.
My producer says that they want a subclass that serves their class. Is that your thoughts on that as well?
Exactly. They want to produce workers. They don't want you to be critical thinkers. They want you to be able to work in their factory or plant, which, as AI and robots come online, that's going to be even waning as opportunities for folks. But they don't want folks to critically think and make decisions for themselves in ways that challenge that elite class that has always been here, but is really starting to emerge with a nasty head in recent years.
I've heard that the $1 billion that the House bill cut from the Department of Education includes breakfast programs, lunch programs. And in many of these rural as well as urban school districts, these are the only meals these students receive all day long. How difficult is it to learn on an empty stomach?
It's incredibly difficult to learn on an empty stomach. And let's be clear, those cuts are actually coming in the Department of Agriculture, which does the free school lunch programs. They collaborate with the Department of Education, but they cut that $1 billion. That not only has an impact on the students, and we already know that there's food insecurity in a lot of communities around the country, and schools are the only place where some young people get access to healthy meals. You eliminate those funds. There's already tight budgets in those states to try to even fill those gaps. the access to healthy foods. There are going to be more processed foods and that those kids get. And then also those foods are sourced from local farms. So it's going to have a negative impact on the economy of those states that are going to be impacted by that $1 billion cut. And it's one of the most drastic cuts to that program ever. And it's going to have an economic impact and a human impact. Kids will go hungry.
Diallo, is there a way forward? Many have suggested that many of these so-called Doge cuts are designed to lay the foundation for the largest tax break for the billionaire class in American history. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. We're speaking with one of the nation's foremost authorities on the U.S. Department of Education. When we come forward, Diallo Brooks, he's in the hot seat. We're all in a hot seat for our children, and I can't wait to hear his response on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. It's been 5 years since a black woman, Breonna Taylor, was shot and killed after police performed a no-knock warrant at her apartment in Louisville, Kentucky. Former officer Brett Hankinson was convicted of violating the 26-year-old's civil rights by shooting blindly into her apartment. A coalition of attorneys general is suing the Trump administration over mass cuts to the education department. Black New York Attorney General Letitia James calls it an attack on vital services. Black Maryland Senator Angela Also Brooks introduced her first bill, the Tariff Transparency Act, requiring a review of tariffs on Mexico and Canada. She says President Trump's tariffs hurt consumers and small businesses and challenges his administration to prove otherwise. And federal prosecutors are investigating New York City hotels housing migrants seeking asylum seekers' info. President Trump's supporters Tom Homan warned Governor Kathy Hochul of an ICE crackdown and praised Black Mayor Eric Adams for cooperating. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Every day, a child in poverty waits for a sponsor is another day of hopelessness. There are thousands of kids who've been waiting over a year. End their wait. Sponsor a child with compassion today. Just text the word radio to 83393.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The attacks on diversity spending around the country is not affecting HBCU sports. Amazon signed a 4-year agreement to sponsor the Magic City Classic football game in Birmingham, a showcase event featuring Alabama State versus Alabama A&M. The game is regarded as the biggest HBCU football matchup in the country. Over 60,000 fans showed up for last year's game. The game generates more than $25 million for the local economy. Over the next 4 years, the game will be called the Amazon Magic City Classic. Amazon's exclusive involvement guarantees Alabama State and Alabama A&M at least $1.15 million over the next 4 years. This year's Magic City Classic is scheduled for October 25th at the historic Legion Field, the same stadium where USC beat an all-white University of Alabama team in 1970 with an all-black backfield. If you're going to the Magic City Classic, you will feel the history. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
A new day is on the horizon.
Behind every great moment in history, there's a woman whose story went untold. This March, KBLA Talk 1580 celebrates the trailblazers who changed our world. From Rosa Parks to Constance Baker Motley, from Katherine Johnson to Kamala Harris, these are the voices that broke barriers, challenged limits, and reshaped America. Join us all month long as we honor the women who dared to dream, fight, and lead. KBLA Talk 1580, amplifying women's stories that inspire generations.
We've got a lot to talk about.
On January 7th, 2025, the Eaton Canyon Fire scorched Altadena, torching everything in its path. Homes, wealth, and legacy burned in one night. But will Altadena rise from the ashes? I'm James Farr. On the Conversation Live Altadena Rising, we're chronicling the recovery, the resilience, and justice for the nation. This is the show of record, unapologetically progressive. We're not blacking down. So join me, James Farr, on the Conversation Live Altadena Rising every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific with the rebroadcast on Sunday at noon.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. KBLA Talk 1580 is pleased to announce that, like George and Wheezy,
We're moving on now.
earlier this year, we were named a semifinalist for the American Climate Leadership Awards 2025. Wait for it. You ready? KBLA Talk 1580 was recently selected as one of 10 finalists being considered for this prestigious award. Hundreds of organizations, institutions, and even cities were nominated in the selection process. But KBLA Talk 1580 has made it to the finals. You're invited to watch live on Wednesday, April 16th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central, as Eco America announces the winner and the runner-up, awarding over $200,000 in prize money. To watch live, just go to ecoamerica.org to register and attend the online ceremony. That's ecoamerica.org. Don't miss the presentation of the American Climate Leadership Awards 2025, Wednesday, April 16th, and wish us luck. Caring about the climate, caring about the community, changing the conversation. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got your black. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is Diallo Brooks. One of these days, and I want my team to be ready, I'm going to invite my producer to the stage, Gina Towns. I'm going to invite Orlando Page to the stage, our StreamYard engineer. And Miles Lowe, man, you're coming to the stage. You are doing a great job. The music is fantastic. I trust that the sound is crystal clear. And Marcus Miller.
That's whose music that was.
That was Marcus Miller's music. So I want to give him a shout out. Diallo, let me dream for a moment on this question of education. Let me just dream for a moment. I'm President-elect of the United States. You've laid out a great case for every disparity that exists in the Department of Education and the coordination, for example, between the Department of Education and the Department of Agriculture just to feed our kids so they can learn. I asked Diallo Brooks to serve as the United States Department of Education under the administration of former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. You accept, you go to the Senate, you go through the confirmation process. You come to cabinet meetings. Given the state of education in America and your input in the President of the United States' budget as Secretary of Education, what does Diallo Brooks prioritize and ask for on behalf of all of the American children?
Wow, so that's a deep question to ask, but I think it's a very important question to ask. Is like, what can we imagine our education system to be? And I would really advise the president to really try to push, and I know it'd be difficult in this climate, but if all things were equal and we could create our utopia, I would say we would want a federalized education system where we move the resources to train our teachers, to pay our teachers, to make sure our class sizes are the right ratio, teacher, adult to student. And sometimes that might mean co-teachers in classrooms to help break up the numbers and work with the kids. And then we want to really focus on, like minimal standardized tests, so not really digging into standardized tests, but really a collaborative learning environment. A learning environment where we respect all students, where we acknowledge the students who they are, and help them grow based on who they are, provide the resources necessary. And then also I would really focus in on like creating a community school environment. And some of that was happening on the previous administration, under Biden's administration.
What do you mean by community school?
Community hubs, where the school is a part of the community. You have organizations in the community interacting with the schools, providing resources. That the school is not this separate building that just happens to be sitting on the corner, that the community is wrapped in and around and through the school. There's services provided by the school, both for the students, but also for the adults after school as well. Maybe there's training, job training courses that are connected to the school. There's healthcare centers that are connected to the school environment. Really creating this robust, interconnected environment where our young people can not only just learn, but they feel a part of a community, a structure that's supporting their whole well-being as a young person. And that's really what I would push for, and the resources that are needed to make that happen. I think then people will feel like, yes, it's a federalized system, but community is engaged and involved, because that's where folks miss. It's like, well, it's local, you don't understand my local issues. But if you have a community environment that has federal standards in which all of these environments should operate under, then you still have that feel of that local kind of autonomy that folks like to throw around all the time, still functioning into this place where we're all kind of receiving the things that we need to be successful.
95,000 schools across the United States, all public. 95,000. That's 95,000 kindergarten teachers. That's 95,000 first grade teachers. That's 95,000 second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth grade teachers. 95,000 ninth grade teachers, 10th grade teachers, 11th grade teachers, 12th grade teachers. Some schools so overcrowded, they have double sections of teachers, given the size of the classes that are matriculating into their classes.
Right.
The job opportunity of a very well-funded, well-financed educational system producing generation after generation of taxpayers.
Right.
The average American earns $62,500 a year. You multiply that number times 95,000 per year, and that's a conservative number.
Oh, very conservative.
Those people pay taxes when they graduate. When you think about, if I may deviate for just a moment, 1,500 pardoned, fully pardoned and restored citizens who ran through the capital of the United States using the same numbers, 62,500. That's $97 million a year in disposable income. That's taxable. For 1,500 people, once their rights were restored, that's $1 billion every 10 years for 1,500 people. Imagine a world with Diallo Brooks of 95,000 graduating 8th grade and 12th grade classes, earning $62,000 a year conservatively.
Right.
That's just how much money well-educated, thoughtfully educated students bring every graduating class to the economy. It is unimaginable, the size and scope of the numbers. And those are the workers we're asking to come into the workforce. Diallo, the economics of a good education are astounding, are they not?
They're very astounding. And your number is even is conservative, because you haven't even calculated in the support staff in those school buildings, the janitors, the nurses, the counselors, the principals, the administrators within the building. And so
officer friendly at the door.
Exactly. So you have this robust economic impact that it has on the community as well. And that's why I said we have to get into a much more community-based focus around how we robustly create healthy, thriving environments. I always equate to like anything that government does should be supporting safe, healthy, thriving environments for our population, right? And so what are the tools that we need to put in place to make that happen? And I'd argue, and I've heard, conservative folks talk about this, that, oh, we need to close schools and have school choice and get rid of unions and bad teachers and all this great stuff. Well, teachers are underpaid, right? If we paid a competitive salary for the work that teachers do in a classroom, like some of the teachers that we call bad, sure, I'd be a terrible teacher if I had 50 students in my class and I'm the only teacher in that environment. It'd be hard to really get to the academic gains because I'm mitigating just people, right? Just holding people in a classroom. But if we invest in the things that are important around robustly, because you can't move, and one of the arguments is like, yeah, school choice. Let's move kids out of the bad schools into the good schools. Well, those good schools can't hold all of the kids. We need all of the schools to be good schools. That should be the goal.
That's right.
Not just busing kids and moving kids and shuffling chairs on a sinking Titanic. Because those good schools will have problems when you have more kids poured into that building.
50 kids in a classroom. I mean, they need 10 adults for 50 kids on a field trip.
Right.
Just a field trip, let alone someone sitting in a classroom with 50 kids by themselves. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Our education expert, Diallo Brooks, is with us when we come forward on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
While you're stuck in traffic, we can at least bring you up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month. If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your Senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
1 in 3 children born today will get diabetes. This sad prediction by the Centers for Disease Control will come true if millions of Americans don't improve their lifestyles, especially by changing what they eat, how much they eat, and how active they are every day. Every 23 seconds, another American gets diabetes. Stop diabetes before it starts. To learn more, contact the American Diabetes Association or download our free diabetes education programs at learningaboutdiabetes.org.
Order for Jennifer C.
Is this my double shot, double cream, double froth, double pump, double whip, double sleeve?
Yeah. Can you handle that much caffeine?
Did you know Discover automatically doubles all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year?
Oh, really? That's great.
Seriously, did you know Discover automatically doubles all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year?
Yeah, you just said that.
Did you say I just said that?
Yeah, I'm cutting you off.
I can't have any more? Why not?
You earn, we match. Discover Cashback Match. See terms at discover.com/credit.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Imagine a Los Angeles where everyone can thrive, where communities have access to the resources they need to succeed. That's the vision of Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. They're dedicated to improving life in LA County by providing educational support, employment assistance, and spaces for community engagement. By 2050, they want LA to be the best place to connect, create, learn, live, and play. They're working toward an education system that's well-resourced and culturally responsive, becoming a hub for artists and innovators, and making sure everyone has access to healthy food, quality health care, and safe housing. It's about building a future where we all have the chance to succeed. We invite you to learn more about their mission and get involved with Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you, when we fight, we win. The Youth Justice Coalition is challenging America's addiction to incarceration and discrimination. YJC works to dismantle policies leading to mass incarceration, law enforcement violence, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Their approach? Transformative justice, community intervention, free LA high school, legal defense, and system monitoring. YJC promotes safety without relying on prisons. Their goal? Prevent system contact and help people exit the system through direct action, advocacy, and education. Want to get involved or need help? Call 323-235-4243. That's 323-235-4243. Join YJC in creating change. When we fight, we win. KBLA Talk 1580, your voice for justice. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Miles Lowe, you're handling it over there, brother. You're handling it, and I appreciate it. The show appreciates it. Thank you, and I trust that our mic and our sound issues are beginning to get worked out. I am so grateful to Gina and to Orlando and to Angie and Miles. My very special guest in this hour is Diallo Brooks. Diallo, you know what? During the break, I was thinking about Simone Biles. I got to give our listeners something to hold on to. One of the most winningest, most medalists, if you will, in the history of the games. She starts in kindergarten. That means either her parents can afford to send her to gymnastics class, or we have to imagine 95,000 public schools with a gymnast teacher who works with our children in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, so the Biles family doesn't have to pay for gymnastics outside of the school. And that it ultimately is extremely competitive. And by the time these 95,000 schools produce millions of world-class gymnasts, by the time they're 17, before they go to college, Simone Biles emerges out of that massive pool of Americans who are qualified to represent the United States in the games. I'm only discussing gymnastics. I'm not discussing geometry, arithmetic. I'm not discussing English, Greek, Latin, French, and English, and multiple languages, Spanish as well, Portuguese. I'm not even discussing the other aspects of education that are denied our students in their formative years. Imagine if every school had a diving coach or a swimming coach. I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine the advantages that some students have, Diallo, versus the advantages other students have. And the only reason I'm raising this point is because so many of us have low expectations, and we've gotten used, Diallo, to the idea of low expectations. So I really appreciate the idea of your dream. Diallo Brooks has a dream like Martin Luther King. It's a real one. But we have the capacity and the possibility and the capability of getting there. Mr. Brooks.
Yeah, so before we end, I wanted to really kind of focus in on some like policy kind of recommendations, like things that I've seen in spaces that are trying to do education the right way.
Mr. Secretary, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Tough job too. But we should really focus on high quality teacher training, making sure that our teachers have the resources they need and are trained on a regular basis to meet the needs of our young people. We need to really focus in, they're taking it away, but we need to focus in on equity and inclusivity to make sure that there's equity and inclusivity within our systems and within our school buildings and within the communities around them. We need to focus on student well-being. Their health and well-being is a part of it. So when you mention food, making sure that there's food, making sure that they're nurses, making sure that they're healthy individuals from the mental health perspective, mental health services within the school building. We need to focus in on that early childhood education, making sure that as soon as they're ready, that young people are getting an introduction to the education environment and educational learning. We need a rigorous curriculum, so we need to have high standards and have a curriculum that really challenges our young people to grow mentally and also personally. And then also we need to create an environment that has parental and community involvement.
How do you get there? Now talk with us about that. We got a good 7 minutes. How do you get parents involved again?
Well, parents have to, some parents have had negative experiences in the school themselves. Schools were a scary place for them when they were in school. And so now that their children are in school, they're scary places. And there's been work, and the Department of Education was working on this. I had a colleague that specialized in parental involvement, community involvement with the school. And what it is, the schools that are doing it well have staff, they train their teachers to reach out and connect with their students' parents. And not be passive about it, where we're just like, well, we hope the parents will come in and engage with us. No, those teachers, those school administrators were actually introducing themselves, creating pathways to connect with those parents, whether they were going to the homes of the students, whether they were inviting parents in during times in which parents could be in the school, creating robust programs. And there's science out there around it. There's folks that have already studied this, that are real experts at this around engaging parents. And parents that are involved, their students are much more likely to succeed in the school environment.
You bring back this a story my father used to tell me. He said that my mother was, meaning my grandmother Helen, his mother, Grandma Helen was in the choir with his teachers. And Dad had to sit on the front row of church every Sunday. And so by the time his mother got finished talking with her girlfriend, who was his teacher, man, that was a long Sunday for my dad, because the teacher and the parent were only 7 days away from meeting again.
Right.
That's real community.
Right.
I mean, they went to church together. They knew their parents. They were engaged in community events together. And unfortunately, and honestly, it was the byproduct of segregation. It was the product of living in the Jim Crow South, where African Americans lived in certain communities, and we had to make the best of what we had.
Exactly.
Is there something that has been lost in support of the idea of desegregation that has torn apart that basic community structure?
Yeah, so the community structure has been torn apart in that way, and those institutions are not as connected as they were at that point. The other piece is that there's been resegregation around our schools. Our schools still are relatively segregated because of white flight, as Brown v. Board. After Brown v. Board, white folks pulled their kids out of the schools where the Black kids were coming to. So there's still kind of a level of segregation, but we've also, because we don't shop in the stores that are Black owned anymore, we can shop in any store we want to. We don't have the same connectedness that existed at that time. So there has to be some intentionality about creating and building community. Community is not just people living next to each other. Community is people actually interacting in the way that you mentioned with each other, where they have a vested interest in the health and well-being of the person that's next door to them.
Diallo, we have about 2 minutes left in our program. Can you leave us with some hope?
Yeah, the hope is, in this environment, there's a lot of pushback that's happening. There's folks that are, elevating lawsuits as we speak to push back against the dismantling of the Department of Education and the lack of resources. There's protests on a regular basis that we've seen that are coming up, but not just on the federal level, but on the local level as well. And then there's civil rights kind of organizations that are really invested, and also very community grassroots organizations that are banding together to really develop strategies around how to close the gaps, how to fill in the gaps during this moment as well, and also where to push back. And sometimes those are not your household name organizations, they're parent and community and student-led organizations.
Diallo, how can our listeners get in touch with you and learn more about what you do, and what assistance can you be to them in their local municipalities? We have about a minute left.
Sure. Well, I'm on Instagram. I don't really use Twitter much anymore for obvious reasons.
Can't blame you.
So folks can look up Diallo Kamal Brooks on those platforms. And, I've just started my own LLC that is a consulting firm at Civic Vision Strategies. If you look that up, you can find me there as well.
And you said we can reach you on Instagram. Give us your Instagram handle again.
It's Diallo Kamal Brooks, all connected together. DIALLO Brooks, BROOKS.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You've been listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest has been Diallo Brooks. Diallo was an intern in my office when I was in the Congress of the United States, and his passion, his commitment to our parents, to our students, to our nation, to his forward thinking on the question of education for all Americans being of equal high quality is something that we can study, that we can learn from, that ought to have impact in every city, every barrio, every ghetto, every neighborhood and community in the nation. My close and dear friend is Diallo Brooks. He's been with us here on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Until we come forward next time, Diallo, you're always welcome.
Thank you again.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica,